Welcome to building block number 3, the Chumash outline, the storyline of the entire Chumash, 5 books of Moses. So you will recall from the overview that the first 3 building blocks of Chinuch we've actually called foundational skills. We don't usually look at the outline of Chumash as a skill, but you're going to see in a few moments why we're calling it an actual skill. So number 1, language acquisition. Language acquisition are the skills you need in order to be able to access the Chumash. So language acquisition includes knowing all the oisius and the nekudais and the blending, reading accurately and fluently, learning all the shirashim that are needed to make sense out of the vast majority of the entire Chumash, and all the prefixes, suffixes, 46 of them with the 303 shirashim. You've got all that. You're now able to enter the world of the Torah. The Oraisa, Hashem's Torah, can be described in the most skeletal definition, the simplest definition, as 2 components. Number 1, a storyline, which is what we're going to look at today. And contained in that storyline is component number 2, Taryag Mitzvahs, 613 instructions. So let's get this really clear. You've got language acquisition in order to be able to make sense out of the Oraisa, Hashem's Torah. Hashem's Torah, in its most simplest format, is 2 components, storyline, and in that storyline, starting from Brias Ha'olam, creation of the universe, all the way till the passing of Moshe Rabbeinu, Yeshua enters Eretz Yisrael, a period of 2,488 years. Within that storyline are plotted 613 instructions. So we're looking at these 3 components, language acquisition, Taryag Mitzvahs, storyline, as actual skills. And the reason why is because anything the child is ever going to learn on the legal side of learning. So for example, Mishnah, Gemara's commentary to the Mishnah, the legal codes like Rambam, Tur, Shulchan Aruch, who give you the legal conclusions of the discussion in the Gemara's commentary to the Mishnah, which itself is a commentary to Taryag Mitzvahs. Oh, so if you know Taryag Mitzvahs, you actually have the platform, the genesis, the starting point for understanding the vast majority of halachic decisions that are made of Taryag Mitzvahs. If you learn anything on the legal side, it must find its source somewhere in 613 instructions. If you learn anything on the non-legal side of the Torah, Medrash, Agadata, Hashkafa, Chassidus, Musa, almost always, the sources that are being described, let's say Mesilas Yesharim or Orchat Tzadikim or Sifrei Chassidus, they're going to give you a support for their statement from the storyline of the Chumash. So you've got legal, Taryag Mitzvahs, non-legal, storyline. These 2 components are the starting point for all the future learning. That's why we're calling it a skill, because what would happen if you've got a filing system for Taryag Mitzvahs in your brain? What would happen if you had a filing system for the storyline in your brain? So that whatever you learn on the future in terms of halacha, legal or non-legal, your brain is able to cross-reference and store it in a specific area because you know which compartment in your brain that mitzvah belongs to. You know which perek in Chumash that information is associated to. So we're looking to inject a map of the Torah in the mind of the child. So he has this filing system. Looking at the entire Bereshis, when you break it down according to the Prakim, which is how we're going to associate a memory system to the Prakim, that's in building block number 6, but it's a marriage in this particular building block because the 2 go together. You're enabling a child to understand how there are 50 Prakim in Chumash Bereshis. And if he knows a 1-line description for each perek, for all the parashas in Chumash Bereshis, then whatever future detail he's going to learn, Psukim, Rashi, Radak, Ramban, Seforno, because he knows the storyline and he has a map in his mind, he knows how to negotiate the map. He knows how to find his place in the map because he knows the story. and how it unfolds. What comes first, what comes next. Because of that, the child will have this incredible sense of, I've got the tools to navigate the Torah. I can find my way around very easily because I have a simple one-line description of every single parak. So you've got 50 prakim for Chumash Bereishis, 40 for Chumash Shemais, 27 for Vayikra, 36 for Bamidbar, and 34 for Devarim. That's our goal, to get this map into the mind of the child. And we're going to show you how to do that. Because what's really going to happen now is a whole ability that the child did not have previously to negotiate, navigate, find information. The best analogy I can offer is what the Ramchal, Rab Moshe Chaim Lutzato, offers in his Sefer Derech Hashem. In his Hagdama, in the introduction, he offers that you can have two Talmidei Chachamim, two Torah scholars who know the exact same amount of information. However, one has superior learning to the other. How is that so? So he explains, one Talmid Chacham could know all the details of the Torah just like the second one. But the difference between the two is that the second one actually has a map in his mind, the perimeters, the hashkafa, the ability to panoramically view all the information and organize it. And because he has the information organized, he's able to cross-reference. He's able to categorize. He's able to recognize similarities and differences, contrast the differences, compare the similarities, and by that way he's then able to enter the world of iyun, of deeply analyzing those differences, comparisons. And therefore claims the Ramchal that when a person has organized learning, his learning is way superior even to someone who has the exact same amount of information but doesn't understand the map, doesn't have a way to categorize and organize that information. The importance of understanding this can be really, I think, gleaned in the following way. The Chumash is written in a way that's fairly logical. You've got Chumash Bereishis, which starts off with Brias Olam, creation of the world. And as you notice the story unfolding, it's quite clear from the chronological sequence of events how you can follow the storyline. 10 generations from Adam till Noach. The Mabul, the flood. 10 generations from Noach till Avraham. Oh, the life of Avram, the life of Yitzhak, the life of Yaakov, the life of Yosef. Yosef goes down to Mitzrayim, sold as a slave. Brothers come later on to get grain, really to look for their brother, and now begins the reuniting of the entire family, and now begins slavery in Egypt, Shibud Mitzrayim. Followed by 10 Makos, Makos 10, and Yetziat Mitzrayim, Matan Torah, 40 years in the Midbar where the various events that took place there. Moshe Rabbeinu passes away, Yeshua enters Eretz Yisrael. That's the dividing line between the Chumash and Sefer Yeshua. So you've got 2,488 years, and there's a fairly clear sequence. However, if a child doesn't have a way to understand how these events unfolded, at least according to the way the Torah reports it, even though the Torah doesn't always give you everything in chronological order, because there are certain events that are described at a place in the Torah where they really took place way before. We're not discussing that now. I'm just sharing with you how we want a child's mind to have an organized view of how the Torah looks. So Bereishis ended with Shibud Mitzrayim right there. The brothers came down, reunited. Yaakov Avinu passes away, gives his brachas to all the Shvatim. And now Shmos begins with the continuation of the storyline of slavery in Egypt, Shibud Mitzrayim. And eventually comes the story with Moshe Rabbeinu and the snare, coming back to Mitzrayim. And you start to recognize, hey, there's a sequence of events taking place here. And this continues this way, Yetziat Mitzrayim, all the way up to Matan Torah. And then very briefly, you've got 3 prakim, Parshas Mishpatim, which breaks from the storyline, so to speak, and just gives you mitzvahs, Tariq mitzvahs. Not all Tariq mitzvahs are there, but you have a lot of mitzvahs just in those 3 prakim, Per Chaf Aleph, Chaf Beis, and Chaf Gimel. Then goes into Truma and Tetzaveh. Truma Tetzaveh is really a description of the materials for the Mishkan. And now you then go into Kitisa, Cheta Egel, and eventually Vayakel Pekudei, where you've got the description of all the different weights and value of all the materials and the construction, assembly of the Mishkan. And that kind of closes Shemais. So even though the prokim in Mishpatim that are not part of the storyline, nevertheless, the child starts to see, oh, I see the storyline makes a pause over here. Then there's 3 prokim which are just Tarek mitzvahs, not all of them. And then it goes back to the storyline, describing more details about the Mishkan until the end of Shmois. Vayikra, which only took place over a period of 1 month, is mostly karbanos. So even though the storyline is not as obvious, but every perek, for the most part, is really a category of information. So perek Aleph, Korban Oila. Perek Beis, the Korban Mincha, the different types of Korban Mincha that you can bring. Perek Gimel, the Shlamim. Perek Dalad, the Chatais. So even though the Chatais will be cross-referenced in other prakim, Perek Vav, it comes up again, but nevertheless, each Perek, for the most part, is devoted to one subject, one topic. So in this sense, by providing the children with a map of the Torah and its sequence of unfolding of events in the storyline and how the breaks, either for mitzvahs, as in Mishpatim, or as in categorization of Karbanos, as in the beginning of Vayikra, the child is nevertheless seeing, oh, there's an order to how I can look at the Torah in an organized way. If you go into the writing of the Mishnah, it becomes obvious that all the Torah Sheba'al Peh that's missing in the Torah Shebechtav. When I say missing, it's because it's not obviously written there, because it's Torah Sheba'al Peh, but it was extrapolated through the Hachamim who knew Yud Gimel Midas Shah Torah Nidreshes Bahen, the 13 tools, so to speak, by which the Torah can be extrapolated. You can take out from the text information that once you know what that information is, you can then reconstruct it from the text itself. So that's the Torah Sheba'al Peh. The Torah Sheba'al Peh was learned sequentially throughout the Chumash, which means that when the Torah was given at Har Sinai, every Tati, every Rebbe learned with their children, with their Talmidim, one section of the Torah at a time. It wasn't called Prakim then, that was much later on. It's not even a Jewish invention, but the concept of the Prakim came much, much later on. But the idea of topics and breaks in the Torah, oh, that's the Petuchos and Stumos. We discussed this in a previous DVD, how to identify the pei for Petucha, an opening of a paragraph, and Samach, Sutuma, which you find in the written Chumashim, the printed Chumashim, those 2 letters, Pei and Samach, designate where the topic starts or ends, based on how much of the margin in the parasha is revealed. So if there's text on both sides of an empty margin in the middle of a line, oh, that's called Sutuma, which means closed. Why is it closed? Because the margin is closed on both ends with text. Ptucha means it's open. So you have a partial text, and then suddenly there's a margin all the way till the vertical margin of the Torah scroll, a Sefer Torah, and that means Ptucha. So those Ptuchas and Stumos were there essentially to tell us when to pause and be misboinen, meditate, contemplate, and figure out the Torah Sheba'al Peh that we've been taught on that paragraph. If you want to check this out, it's the first Rashi is mentioned twice in Perek Aleph, Pasuk Aleph of Vayikra. Rashi explains it there, that Moshe Rabbeinu had time to be mispoinem between the Ptuchos and Stumos, and if Moshe Rabbeinu, who received the Torah directly from Hashem, had to spend time to extrapolate the Torah Sheba'al Peh hidden in that parsha, how much more so us who are a Hedyot, learning from a Hedyot, where Moshe Rabbeinu is a Hedyot in comparison to the Pi Agvura from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how much more so should we spend time trying to understand the missing information, the Torah Sheba'al Peh. When the Torah Sheba'al Peh was written down, quick history lesson, super brief, Rabbeinu HaKadosh saw Hayra Shah, an emergency measure, that if we don't put down the missing information that you can't find directly in the Chumash itself, unless you're part of the Torah Sheba'al Peh, we're going to lose it altogether. So being that the Roman exile had kind of begun because Roman governorship of Eretz Yisrael had already got its grips in Eretz Yisrael, so knowing that we're going to be thrown into this next galus very soon, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, wrote down the Torah Sheba'al Peh, something that till then was actually forbidden. It was a Hayrasha, it was considered Eis La'asais, it's time to take action. And so he wrote it down. Now, look carefully at the way the Torah Sheba'al Peh is written, and you'll recognize one word: organized. If you want to say two words, extremely organized. The Torah Sheba'al Peh is amazing. You don't need my hechsher for that. You just look at the structure. You have the entire Tariag mitzvahs that are extrapolated from throughout the entire Chamisha Torah, and a lot of Agadat as well, and now it's being synthesized into 6 major sections. Shisha, Shin, Shisha, Samach, Sedarim. 6 orders. Interesting word. Seder means organization. Order. Oh, there's sequence here. Yeah, Shisha Sedarim. There are 6 sections to the Mishnah, starting with Zerayim. Zerayim literally translates as seeds, but it refers to agriculture. So all the Taryag mitzvahs which directly relate to agriculture are in this section. But what Rabbeinu HaKadosh then did was break down the book of Zerayim into subsections known as Masechtas, tractates, volumes. So you've got brachas and peah, demai, etc. So you've got all these different mitzvahs which relate specifically to Taryag mitzvahs that relate directly to Zerayim, to agriculture, in this one section. What happened next is even more interesting. And what is that? Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, the president of the Jewish people, then took every single tractate and broke that down into numbered chapters. And then every numbered chapter was then broken down yet again into numbered paragraphs. Each paragraph is called a Mishnah. So watch this. You got a Seder, one of its names could be Zraim, agriculture, or it might be Mayed, seasons, time-bound mitzvahs, or it might be Nashim, anything to do with relationships, marriage, divorce. You've got Nazikin, anything to do with damages, exchange of value, buying, selling, the courts, Sanhedrin, Supreme Court, witnesses. You've got Kodshim and Taharas, the area of Kodshim to do with the Karbanos in the Beis HaMikdash, and Taharas to do with purity and impurity, to use that language loosely. So you've got the 6 sections, and each one is then broken down into named tractates, volumes, and each volume is broken down yet again into numbered chapters, and then again numbered paragraphs. Each paragraph is called a Mishnah. That's extremely organized. That's the concept of Yesh Seder LeMishnah. There really is a sequence to Mishnayos, why each Mishnah follows the next. That's why Kahati, one of the most popular commentaries on the Mishnah, actually offers very often in his short 1 or 2 line introduction to each Mishnah the reason why this Mishnah follows the previous one. So you see that sequence, extremely organized. When the Gemara was written, it's written as a commentary to the Mishnah. So it's part of that organization. When the codes were written, like the Smug, the Rambam, oh my gosh, the Rambam, 14 major books, 83 subsections, and all Taryag mitzvahs are contained within. When the Shulchan Aruch was written based on the Torah, you took all the mitzvahs which apply nowadays, about 279, and you subdivided them into these 4 sections, and each section was then numbered by a simon. And 697 simanin in the first section of those 4, known as Orach Chaim, Shulchan Aruch, the code of Jewish law. Shulchan means table, Aruch means laid. It's Aruch, it's laid out in front of you so you can find the information very easily. So it's all about organizing information. So based on this concept, where you see throughout the history of Klal Yisrael, whenever we needed to take the Torah and, if you want to call, reformat it for the next generation, the organizing principle was always Seder, sequence, organization. It's done in a way that enables the mind to be able to navigate, find information very easily. So that's really one of the most important values of being able to have, if you want to call it, a map of the Chumash in your mind. So that whenever you are, let's say, even learning a Mishnah or a Gemara or a Sefer, and it quotes you, Bereshis Chaf Gimel, so you know, that's Parshas Chayei Sarah, and you know what's happening in Chaf Gimel, that's when Sarah Meinu passed away, so you immediately have the context of that reference. It could be quoting Perek Gimel, let's say in Vayikra, so you know that's Korban Shlamim. So your mind is able to immediately understand, oh, I know what's going on over there, and that helps you understand the context of what's now being quoted in a Mishnah or a Gemara or even a Rishon. So there are a lot of uses over here, but if you want to understand it this way, self-esteem, estimation of self, where will that be improved in a child's learning self-esteem because he actually has a map in his brain? The obvious answer is, hey, the child feels very confident that he knows where this information is, even if it's not down to the smallest detail, but he actually has a title for every perek in the entire Chumash. Later on, we'll talk about Nach as well. And he has a memory system, which we're going to learn about, for being able to retain and remember and recall where that information is. He can find it very easily. So these are ways that we can understand the value of having a map of the Torah in our minds. Another aspect of this is that when you give context to children, we talked about this in tremendous detail in building block number 4, which is contextual learning. Give the kid the big picture. The big picture is B'rias Ha'olam til Tchias HaMeisim. That's the biggest picture possible in terms of time and space. Those are the dimensions that you and I as physical human beings live in. In Olam HaEmes, there are no boundaries. Time and space is meaningless because the neshama has access to future, past, and present simultaneously, because the neshama is a cheluk elokam mimal, a pasuk from Eiv, where we know that the neshama inside of us is really from a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And so in the Olam HaEmes, we're not talking about time and space. It doesn't exist. It's all merged as one. That's why Hashem's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, Haya Hove V'yiyeh, refers to Hashem's ability to be constant. Some translate it as eternal, but it really means constant. He always was, always is, and always will be in existence. And when you and I mention the Akedah, Hashem doesn't have to pull out of his mind, Kaviyachol, an event that took place nearly 4,000 years ago, because in his mind, Hashem HaKadosh Baruch Hu immediately exists in that moment of the Akedah when we mention it, especially on Rosh Hashanah. So the concept of context in our human limited ability while we're in this world is to see it in terms of B'rias Ha'olam, creation of the universe, till Tchias HaMeisim, till Mashiach comes, builds a B'ai Shlishi, and then Tchias HaMeisim, resurrection of the dead. That's the storyline in the biggest picture possible. We learned about that in contextual learning. The Chumash takes up 2,488 years out of 6,000. 2,488, that's a sizable proportion. So when you're teaching the children a system of being able to see what's going on in every part of the entire Chumash and have that as a map in their mind, you're simultaneously actually also helping them access between 1/3 and a half of the entire human history, as we call the 6,000-year timeline of Jewish history. So that's enormously valuable just in of itself. So the points that we've made so far is that when a child, Talmud Chacham, student, has context and has a filing system so that all information he gets is not isolated pieces of details that are not correlated or connected, but rather he knows exactly where it belongs, and because he knows where it belongs, he's actually able to make connections that he would otherwise not be able to make in learning each piece of information in isolation of other information. So that's how we're going to teach the entire Chumash in this particular building block. We're going to go in several steps. Step number 1, which is this introduction to understand the value of having the big picture. Step number 2 is how are we going to deliver that picture into the mind of the child? So we'll show you, using materials, how that map looks like, how we're going to break that map down, and then how that becomes preparation for future learning, future detail, because the brain will be able to say, oh, that information belongs in this category, this Chumash, this Parsha, this Perek. Oh, that piece of information, oh, that's a mitzvah that is found in, let's say, Perek Yud Beis or Yud Gimel in Dvarim, where it's just almost only mitzvahs. So the child will be able to say, oh, that storyline, oh, that's the life of Avram Avinu, oh, and that spans these parshas. Oh, that's the life of Noach. He died 950 years old in the year 2006. So the kids start to see context, sequence, proportion. And you won't have a child, as once happened, coming up to me by, I think, 11 years old, said, I thought Noach lived 1 week after Adam. So it took a second to kind of figure out what you talk. Oh, I get it. Yeah, Parshas Bereishis is followed a week later by Parshas Noach, which famously contains the story of the flood. But Noach actually died in the year 2006 of a 6,000-year timeline. That's over 1/3 of human history has taken place in just 2 weeks of Torah readings. So of course a child, if he doesn't know context, will not realize where is that in the timeline, in the big scheme of things. So we are providing the children with this tremendous value of a map and the tools to negotiate the map, navigate the map. You're in an ocean, where are you? You need tools, you need instruments, measurements to be able to identify where am I going, where am I coming from? And that's what we're going to do in this building block. We're going to provide that when the children have mastered language acquisition, building block number 1, and they're simultaneously now learning Tariag mitzvahs, which are plotted with no obvious pattern throughout the entire Chumash. Now they're learning the Chumash storyline. Their brain is now going to have these files for where the Tariag mitzvahs belong, where the storyline belongs, and where future learning will be able to find a compartment, a file in the brain, and then be able to make these cross-referencing connections, comparisons, contrasting of differences. Once we've shown you how we're going to provide that map using various materials, then I'm going to go to step 3. We're going to go sequentially from the beginning of Chumash Bereishis till the end, and then start Shmos till its end. And we'll do the whole Chumash that way. I'm going to do it with pictures and with very simple materials that will match that picture. So, that picture describes that perek. Oh, and you've got a title card which actually also describes that perek, but that's in words. So you've got a picture, that's spatial intelligence, and you've got words, that's language intelligence. Then you're going to sequence them according to the number of that perek, perek aleph, perek beis, perek gimel. And what you're going to then have is mathematical intelligence. So as the children matrix this information, and it's visually seen in front of them, they can auditorily describe what's happening because they'll read the title for every single picture. They know which number, perek aleph, which is number 1, perek beis, number 2. And they're going to learn a memory system that's all about simanim, so that their brain will have a way to retain and find that information instantly, literally. And this coupled together will be the 3 parts of this presentation. The introduction, which you just had. Then I'm going to show you the materials that we're going to be using. And then I'm going to go through the entire Chumash, perek by perek. Each perek is going to take probably about a minute or less to describe. And you're going to see the sequence, and you're going to build in your mind the map. You'll start to see it literally grow inside of your mind. And then you'll be able to start doing some cross-referencing so that all future detail that you're going to learn, psukim, a perush on a pasuk, Rashi, Ramban, etc., your brain will know where that belongs, or where to look for it, or where to cross-reference. Okay, ready for step number 2? We just finished the introduction. We're now going to look at some of the materials that are relevant to learning the storyline map of the Chumash. Hold on tight.